Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/get100 and use code GET100. That's code GET100 at prizepicks.com/get100 for a first deposit matchup to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
You should have seen her face. It was priceless. I'll never forget it.
So you didn't kill her then?
Of course not.
No. I know you haven't been in the game for a while, mate, but we still do kill people. Sort of our raison d'etre, you know.
You don't want to kill her, do you? You want to hurt her. Just like you hurt me.
Nobody knows me like you do, Drew.
She'd better not get in our way.
Don't worry about it.
I do.
Spike, my boy, really don't get it, do you? You tried to kill her, but you couldn't. Look at you, you're a wreck. She's stronger than any slayer you've ever faced. Force won't get it done. You gotta work from the inside. To kill this girl, you have to love her.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Still Slaying, a Buffyverse podcast. I'm Penny.
And I'm Kara.
And I'm Anwen.
This episode, we're going to be discussing Season 2, Episode 14, Innocence, the thrilling conclusion to last week's surprise. Innocence was directed by JW and written by JW, Rob Deshotel, Dean Batali, and Marty Noxon. Original air date, oh my gosh, was January 20th of 1998.
So, Kara, we missed you last week. I'm glad you're back.
So glad to be back.
Before we dive into Innocence, do you have anything you're dying to share about bad eggs or surprise?
I hate bad eggs. I know we've talked about this. That episode it really I think I watched it in maybe middle school is when I have a memory of watching it. And I was terrified of health class then. In high school, I was like, I want nothing to do with any sort of experiment where I have to watch an egg. Because it's just, it's just not necessary. But that episode is one I skip, I think, every single time I do a rewatch. So yeah, I was not sad about skipping that. And surprise, these 2 episodes are probably some of my favorites in the entire show. So surprise was one that it was great to go back and watch again. But I think most of my thoughts are about Innocence. That's where I feel like we have a lot of juicy things to discuss. So
I agree.
Ready to jump in today.
And of course, we don't have any recaps of skipped episodes that we need to go over. So we're not going to do that this week. And there's not really new news, But the Clinton Lewinsky scandal was raging at this time, like we talked about last week. And it just is so relevant to this story about a powerful older man taking advantage of a younger woman, and then somehow she gets the blame. So I can't stop drawing parallels between Buffy and Angel and Clinton and Monica, and it's just in the back of my mind. And I'm sure it was in the back of everyone's mind when they were watching this at the time.
See, and that's why I think for me, the age that I was when this was originally airing, I was cognizant of the Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky scandal. And I can remember, things that my grandmother had to say about it, or my parents. And it's funny how what I was told about it and what I consumed about it at that age and my thoughts on it have changed so drastically as an adult. Because now, I know you guys touched on it, but it just, the power dynamics being so drastically off, now it just makes me angry every time I think about how Monica Lewinsky was treated. So it was the same kind of thing actually watching Surprise and Innocence again as I got older, especially as a 35-year-old, even as a 25-year-old. And I will note, it's kind of fun that we're getting to do them back to back like this, and we're not jumping around, because I do remember this was when Buffy made the switch from Monday nights to Tuesday nights.
Yeah, and it stayed at Tuesday for the rest of its run.
So actual viewers watched Surprise on Monday night and then Innocence on Tuesday night, which must have been really kind of unique back then when we didn't have Netflix and streaming and you couldn't watch stuff back to back. I would have been so happy for that. And it's when Dawson's Creek premiered, another show I should not have been watching in 4th grade. But I remember it.
You were a prodigy, apparently.
Apparently.
Or if you're watching Ted Lasso, Jamie calls himself a progeny instead of a prodigy, and it kills me every time.
That's awesome.
Gosh. I love it.
All right, so since Kara wasn't here last week, you get to be first.
Ew. So I think I had a hard time, again, kind of picking specific points to go over in this episode, but for me, the one thing that stands out the most every single time I watch this is our introduction to Angelus. And David Boreanaz is one of those people, I've always enjoyed him as an actor and what he's in, but my response to him isn't typically like, he's amazing, this performance was amazing. But with Angelus, what he does with it, I think is absolutely brilliant. And I love watching the subtle differences that he brings out on screen to show us the difference between Angel and Angelus. And the way he carries himself, the way he turns his head, there's a much, faster movement to him. He's sharper as Angelus, and I just get really excited every time I get to a rewatch and we get to that point and Angelus gets to come out. So my first overall kind of, I guess, relatively small point really is just watching David Boreanaz portray Angelus and knowing what's to come. It just makes it that much more fun.
It really is fantastic. And I agree, he carries himself differently. Angelus is more confident and funny. Like, Angel isn't funny. He's always in a broody, serious mood. Angelus is hilarious.
True.
And he's quicker. He holds his head higher. He's always smoking. It's so funny. I used to be a smoker, and every time I see him with that cigarette, I'm like, oh, I want a cigarette. Like, it really is true that seeing people smoke on screen makes you want to smoke. It's really It's bad.
But also, I agree, Penny, and also, like, I don't like smoking either, and you don't see it in TV anymore, really. But some people smoke so well, and David Boreanaz smokes really well in that very first opening shot when he's sucking the neck of that woman, and then he breathes out the smoke. There's just something about it. He's just so kind of theatrical with it, which is really fun to watch.
I do love that. And there's something with him as a villain. You know, I can imagine as an actor that it would be so much fun to be able to then step into that role and do something completely different. But even in Jealous as a villain, there is a reason that he's infamous. And, you know, we think about what he did to Drusilla. Think about how he behaves in general. He approaches, you know, kind of tearing Buffy and the Scooby Gang apart with almost like a surgeon-like precision. He's not sloppy. Everything is calculated and so well thought out to create the most emotional damage possible, which makes him so much more terrifying than your average kind of monster of the week villain, or even other big bads that we see earlier on, like the Master and later on. But there's just something about him that feels so sinister, and it makes the show so fun to watch, even as you're watching him, you know, do all of these horrific things. It's so compelling. And I can't wait to get into the rest of season 2, because he's a wonderful villain.
He really is a great villain. And he is cruel in a way that we don't see any other characters really who go for the emotion the way that he does. And the patience he has to, like, toy with Buffy, right? He's like, to Spike and Drusilla, he's like, give me tonight. Lay low. I'm going to take care of things. And he has a plan. And when Buffy goes to the apartment to look for him and he's there, and the way he acts toward her, I swear that conversation could have been pulled out of my own life. Like when I hooked up with some guy and then the next day he was all like, I should have known you couldn't handle it. Like
it's
such classic to watch. Like, dude, like, you know, it's too intense for you. You're a child. But then he also kind of calls her a slut. I mean, it is mean. And he doesn't touch her. He doesn't hurt her physically at all at that point. It's all this, like, subtle, emotional game.
And such a flip, because he's so into her and he's so passionate and so caring from the beginning. And then as soon as he flips, he is just offhand. He's just whatever. And even the fact that he sort of walks away and says, love you too, I'll call you. You know, it's just so cruel.
That was just like a knife in the heart. And poor Buffy. This is another one of those episodes where I think they do such a good job, at least keeping in mind that she is a teenage girl. This was her first, you know, intimate sexual experience, and it's like everyone's worst fear. At least, you know, every teenage girl, young woman's worst fear. She has this guy that she loves, thinks he loves her, which she doesn't quite understand what has happened yet, but the way he just brushes her off and is so cold is so crushing to watch every single time. Ugh.
Yeah.
And she looks so vulnerable. She has that look on her face, and it's just horrendous. And you see, it's one of the things I love about Sarah Michelle Gellar. She's such a good actor, because you see that absolute sheer vulnerability, and her lips trembling and her big eyes are shining, and how can you say these things to me? And then, you know, even in the same episode, but specifically I remember Steve talking about in Bad Eggs, when she comes up out of the ground and she's killed that monster, and that look that she can have on her face that is so hardcore and so intense, and she's such a badass, and the fact that she can swing from one to the other quite quickly is amazing. She's incredible.
It's really hard to imagine anybody else in this role. Like, she's just so uniquely talented.
She's amazing. I love that Buffy is so girly. and feminine, and that nobody ever tells her, like, why are you wearing ribbons? Or like, your outfit is so girly. Like, nobody ever tries to change that about her. Giles sort of makes some comments about it once in a while, but they're more to the effect of, like, kids today and their weird fashions.
Yeah.
Not like a Slayer should be wearing, you know, tougher clothes.
Yeah.
There's a great line in season 4 where she's like, oh, I've patrolled in this halter many times. And the halter she's wearing is like held on by like dental floss. It's so tiny and delicate. And she's like, nah, no problem.
So funny.
It's something I've always loved about her, because at this point in sort of most fiction, women that were action-y were sort of all cut from the same cloth. They were Lara Croft. They were Jennifer Garner,
Linda Hamilton
Alias.
from Terminator.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were Linda Hamilton. They were like tough, and Buffy never loses her, you know, girliness and her desire to wear like pretty earrings and do her hair and all that stuff. And I've always loved that about her.
A rocket launcher.
That's great.
Like, she still looks gorgeous
and vulnerable.
Yep.
It's amazing that she could hold that rocket launcher and look badass and sad
and cute
at the same time.
All at once.
It's such an amazing moment.
Oh, gosh.
I also love that we get to see this connection that Angelus has with Drusilla. And when he's like, nobody knows me like you do, Giroux, and you start to see the beginnings of what's going to be this like really painful love triangle. He has this great line where he says, to kill this girl, you have to love her. And it's sort of like the essence of the whole show.
Yeah.
Buffy is too strong for somebody to come at her from a like direct frontal assault. You have to get inside. You have to get to know her, and you have to get inside her emotions and motivations to even have a chance. A little detail you can see in the apartment scene and again at the mall, that Angel has moved his clotter ring to the other hand, and it's pointing to his fingers, indicating that he's single. Even though Buffy is still at that point wearing hers in the I belong to somebody position. I loved that detail. I was like, oh my God, you can see the ring.
Such a nice touch. A nice, horrible touch.
That's very cool.
It really is. Oh, Angelus. I know that when Spike first sees Angel in School Hard, he calls him Angelus.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back and forth over the course of this season. And I don't think it was nailed down completely until the show Angel, when he turns, and then it becomes Angelus. Like,
because they're still calling him Angel at this point, right? Aren't they? Even though they know he's turned evil, this episode they're still calling him Angel.
That emphasis
and also Spike
on the gel. Part. Jealous.
It just sounds better than Angelus. Angelus sounds like Angela, and it's not quite.
It's just not quite as evil.
Or Los Angeles. I'll hear that every single time with Angelus.
That's true.
So much more intimidating.
Yeah, well, that was Angelus is my first point too. So I've just got a couple of bits to add to that. I agree with everything you just said, Cara. I just think he's just so much fun to watch, and it's almost kind of like this release. Like Angel is so kind of buttoned up, and like you say, Penny, he stoops over and he's kind of all weighed down by his soul, and he's very broody. And I just think it's fun for the audience, and it must have been so much fun for David to suddenly break out and be just this theatrical character who has so much more movement and so much more kind of dynamic display of behavior with everything he says and his movements and everything. It just must have been so fun. And the scenes where he and Drew and Spike are all laughing together, and like he slaps Spike at one point and Spike just laughs. Like they just must all have had so much fun with it. I just love to watch it. He's funny, but also just so menacing, you know, that when he turns up to school and he's lurking there in the dark and Willow starts to walk slowly towards him, he says, come over here. It was so menacing and so horror movie-like. And you do just get that sense of how dangerous he is. And he's dangerous because he knows them all as well, and again, tormenting Buffy when he says, "Dream on, schoolgirl," and slaps her to the ground. And it's horrifying. And I'm just really fascinated by this concept of the vampires, the vampire with a soul losing his soul. And everything that was human about Angel, the compassion and the remorse and his conscience, his goodwill towards other people, and what I guess other vampires see as their burden of morality is gone. It's just, everything's just cleared away. In the same way that when he's got a soul, he's tormented by the things that he did as a vampire. Now, without a soul, he's disgusted and infuriated by how Buffy made him feel human. So it's completely flipped, but he still has all the same experience and the same memory and the same thoughts of what had happened. But it's just like it completely switches from good to evil. And I love that concept, and the fact that he's completely changed, but he's still the same being, is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And I love that scene with Drusilla when she remembers that Angel tormented her. So the same thing. So she's got memories of being human and of losing her entire family and of being tormented by Angelus, and he drove her mad. But she doesn't care because she's also now evil.
Yeah.
And so she actually supports that kind of behavior. So when she says, "You don't want to kill her, you want to hurt her like you hurt me." And then she's actually thrilled by it. She's actually like, "That is so cool because you're just this awful, evil vampire that I love." And that's even more twisted. He did that to her and she's good with it. And that's kind of like, again, we could go into a big commentary about what that means in our world with abusive relationships. We probably won't go too deep into that, but it's fascinating in this show that she's just like, "Haha, that's awesome, Angel. You do that to her as well because you did it to me, and that's funny."
Yeah.
Oh,
she's
it just
delighted to have him back. She says, "We're a family again." She's so happy.
Exactly. She's so into it. And then later when Buffy and Angel fight, that fight at the mall, with the sprinklers going and everything, is so savage. Everything he knows about her, like I said before, everything he knows about her, everything that's happened between them is still there, but he sees it differently. So he knows that vulnerability that she has, and he knows how much she loved him. And he says, "You can't kill me." And she just says, "Give me time." And I've got more to say about that later in the spoiler section, but I'll leave it at that for now. Yeah, just absolutely adore seeing him, and can't wait for the next few episodes to see the rest because it's very cool.
Yeah. The thing that this show set out to do are two main things: subverting tropes, right? Like instead of the monster chasing the pretty girl chases the monsters. And then the other one is externalizing the experiences of adolescence and turning inner demons into literal external demons. This is a great example of the teen anxiety of losing your virginity and what are people going to think? Because one of the things that happens as a result of Angel turning is that the fact that they had sex becomes immediately public to Buffy's friends, right? Giles knows, Jenny knows, Willow knows, Cordy knows, Xander knows, everybody knows. And it had horrible consequences, and she's blaming herself, but she's also humiliated, right? Like, she did this thing that she was excited about, but also trepidatious about. And then the next day, right, it starts to fall apart and it goes public. And like, when she goes home, her mother's like, "You look different." Like, this is the thing that you're afraid of when you're a teenager, is like, people are going to know.
They're going to be able to tell.
It's an amazing metaphor for the fear of a first relationship that you have in your teenage years. And the slut-shaming part of it, that Angela says, like, "Oh, I thought you were a pro. And if I'd known you were going to give it up so easy, I wouldn't have tried. I wouldn't have bothered," or something like that. It's exactly the thing that I was afraid of when I was a teenager, right? It was like, oh, they're going to think I'm a slut. And in the 80s and 90s, that was a really big thing. Like, it wasn't as common for people to lose their virginity at an early age back then. Like 16, 17 was like an outlier, really. Like, not that many people were having sex in high school. I think it's much more common now.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is.
I think there's other problems with today's current culture where there's like they publicize when people have sex and it's used to shame mostly girls.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the 90s version of it, of just making it public in her little social circle, and it's devastating, right? Like all of them have reactions to it, and Buffy is full of shame and guilt, which is a thing that a lot of girls feel when they have sex for the first time if it doesn't turn out great. But again, this is the show that externalizes these things, so they really hammer it home that that she feels this shame. It's the moment for me when the show goes from good to great.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it tackles this incredibly difficult, intimate, personal, private experience that so many teenagers have, and it just splashes it across the screen. And yeah, David and Sarah are remarkable together, and their scenes and her pain and his coldness, it's a thing of beauty.
It really was such an ambitious episode for so many reasons. And watching, the scene where she's crying on her bed and just kind of like breaking down, every single time I watch it, I start to tear up again. No matter how many times I've seen it, it just hits. And I think, also depending on the different stage of life I was in when I watched that episode, like different things resonate. And this time around, I just felt so bad for Buffy, and I was just like, how dare he make her feel this way? This still makes me so ragey. And and it's hard not to go too much into the real world implications, but the kind of purity culture thing, like I was raised, I grew up in Houston, raised in it was like peak purity culture time. Like there were books everywhere with youth group, all directed towards, girls and not tempting your brother in Christ or any other men. And I remember all sorts of metaphors that I heard about virginity, like with women, like if you see a chewed up piece of gum on the street, you're not going to want to pick up that piece of gum and chew it again. It's the same thing, like, or they would crumple up a piece of paper and like kind of try to flatten it out again. And they're like, can anybody get this piece of paper perfectly flat? And like people could try. And that was made to point out, like, once you've lost your virginity or given up your virginity, you're never the same. And it always seemed to be either you were damaged in some way afterwards, like that was always the implication.
Used up, like you're spent. You lost the one thing, that one
and
thing
so
that made you special.
So one-sided on girls
always
too, right? Like that no one talks about the
girls, or
the boy being ruined because he's had sex once.
The lock and key metaphor, that a lock that can be opened by multiple keys is a terrible lock, but a key that can open multiple locks, well, that's a useful key, like that type of crap.
I haven't heard that particular one before.
Neither have I. That's horrifying.
Like it just yay, Texas. But it just, I think the particular area I was in, that was pretty prominent, and I went back and forth growing up all the time with what I was being taught, with what I could feel was just right, and I was like, this is bullshit, I don't like this. And being told, like, I remember that women shouldn't be ministers, or women are there to help men and you're submissive to your husband. And I remember when I was like 7, I was like, I'm not doing that, like that, no, like this is not how that works. And of course now as I've gotten older, like I've spent a lot of time kind of unpacking and deconstructing that. And this episode just really brings a lot of that up with Sarah Michelle Gellar. And you're right, like the looks on her face, she can be tough and vulnerable and betrayed and hurt and confused all at once. And she just does such a good job that it brings up those feelings every single time that I watch it. Now I'm getting kind of like, it's making me emotional just thinking about it again. But I like your take that this is what really brings the show from good to great. This deeper exploration, and it's such a personal villain arc. Like, what could be more personal for Buffy to battle? Like, it's not just some vampire or a mayor that wait, that hasn't happened yet. I caught myself. Spoilers.
Yeah.
Like, it's not some sort of monster of the week that we see her face. Like, this is the most personal thing that she could deal with. And gosh, it's like JW just wanted to gut punch everyone, and it worked.
Yeah,
brilliantly.
It is a gut punch. It really is.
And even Willow, poor Willow in this episode, seeing Xander kissing Cordelia, and when she gets upset, the look on her face when she says it just means you'd rather be with someone you hate than be with me. Like, I was like, oh, these poor kids.
Yeah,
they're having a rough time.
Willow is the first one who understands that Buffy and Angel had sex, right? Mm-hmm. She did have a little bit of a warning in Surprise where Buffy was like, I think we're going too soon. Yeah. But she gets it right away, and she takes the lead. She's like, Giles, shut up.
I love that. That moment was so great. She just, she's not even looking at him. She looks like follows Buffy with her eyes. She knows exactly what happened, and she just says, shut up. Doesn't even explain, just shut up. I thought that was so great.
And Giles does. Real. He shuts up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Willow really comes into her own in that moment of like, she knows what the right thing is, and she steps up immediately for Buffy. She's a really, really supportive, amazing friend to Buffy. When she goes over to her and says, are you okay? And Buffy's like, no. And she's like, is there anything I can do? The love between the two of them is beautiful. Mm-hmm. It's a really pure friendship, and the two of them are never really competing with each other. They love each other, and they support each other, and they have fun together. And I love seeing a female friendship that never has that competition, like one of us has to be the prettier one of us has to be like, they both love each other so much. Buffy wants Willow to be hot, right? She's like, let me make you hot in the Halloween episode, and she wants Willow to have a relationship, and she's like, Oz wants to be with you and Xander doesn't, so fuck Xander, right? Even though Xander is her friend, she's like, oh, this Oz guy seems really great. It's a lovely friendship that I hope that other women model their friendships after it, because it's really true.
But it is nice to see that they really do love, support, and appreciate each other for exactly who they are. Yeah. Like, Xander. Poor Xander, just, there are some problems with Xander that we've talked about, and I'm sure we'll talk about them much more in the future. But seeing them, it's, and I think it's the way Allison Hannigan and Sarah Michelle Gellar are playing off each other. They play it as if these two know each other's thoughts most of the time, practically. And the way that you mentioned on how it's her eyes don't go anywhere from Buffy. She's focused on her friend because she's realized what's happened and how much pain she's in. It's the subtle things like that I think makes these characters resonate with viewers still. What is it? Almost 30 years after it's taken place, 20 plus years. I don't know what they feel very lived in. Their friendships feel real and three-dimensional and complex. And this episode is one of the best ones that just shows everything about that draws you in.
Yeah, that sort of leads really well into my next point too, because my next point is changing relationships. And we've seen some of that start to develop over the season. And I spoke last week about that scene in Lie to Me with Giles and Buffy towards the end when they're standing there in the hallway at school, and she sort of realizes that he's a grown-up. There's a lot more realizations and changes between relationships in this episode. And the main one, obviously, Buffy and Angel, I'll get into later. That's a whole separate point. But the other people actually do have quite a lot of changes as well. So, and a lot of them are dramatic. So one of the big ones is Willow finding out about Xander being with Cordelia. So that changes her relationship with him forever. And I think that's sort of the end of her crush. And it's nice that it coincides well with her starting to go out with Oz, because she has that. But that's a massive thing, and she's heartbroken by it. And you know, that line that you said, Cara, that you'd rather be with someone you hate than be with me. And you can see how much that hurts him as well, that he realizes, and he's so remorseful about it. And because he does love her, really cares for her so much as a friend. And the dynamic of that love triangle changes, because that's been a love triangle all the way through. You know, Willow loves Xander, Xander loves Buffy, and then they're sort of distracting themselves with other people. But Willow also has that conversation with Oz in the van, which was fantastic to watch, where he notes that her wanting to kiss him seems to have more to do with her getting revenge on Xander.
So do you guys steal weapons from the army a lot?
Well, we don't have cable, so we have to make our own fun.
I get you.
Do you want to make out with me?
What?
Forget it. I'm sorry. Well, do you?
Sometimes when I'm sitting in class, you know, I'm not thinking about class, because that would never happen. I think about kissing you, and it's like everything stops. It's like freeze frame. Willow kissing you. Oh, I'm not gonna kiss you.
What? But freeze frame.
Well, to the casual observer, it would appear that you're trying to make your friend Xander jealous, or even the score, or something. And that's on the empty side. See, in my fantasy, when I'm kissing you, you're kissing me. It's okay. I can wait.
And I just love that. Oz is so astute. You know, he's so observant, and he's respectful of her and their brand new relationship. And he sees this, but he doesn't think less of her for it. He's just pointing it out like Oz does in a matter-of-fact way. This is what it looks like, but that's why I'm not going to kiss you now. But I do want Willow kissage, and that's going to happen later. And I've got time, and I can wait. And look, I just thought, wow, how amazing! Like it's so special.
Sweet, and it's such a great foil to what's going on with Buffy and Angel, right? Oz and Willow are at the beginning, and Buffy and Angel are in some kind of horrible middle. And Oz is so honest and direct and kind. He's everything that Angel isn't in this episode, and it's perfect timing that he's joined the gang at this point, because we need that contrast.
It gives you that hope. It makes you realize that there's good out there in the world.
He's like the perfect first real boyfriend. Like, I could not think of a better, you know, I don't know if y'all watch Gilmore Girls at all, but
yes,
there's, you know, Rory's first boyfriend on that show is Dean, and Lorelai makes a comment about Dean being the perfect first boyfriend, and that will forever bug me, because he is a terrible boyfriend. He's controlling and jealous. Anyway, that's a whole other show. But on this show, I love that Willow gets Oz, and we as an audience also get Oz to be reminded, like, oh yeah, this is what a nice, healthy, normal, like, teenage relationship.
I don't know if it's normal, because it's so healthy and kind.
That's true.
Yeah, it's the ideal that probably people don't get to reach.
Yeah, I didn't know any high school boys who were that self-aware.
Yeah,
but Oz really is aspirational, right? Like, I would like for more guys to be just like Oz.
Boyfriend goals. And yeah, he knows that she likes him so much, and he likes her, but he wants that start of their relationship to be meaningful. So he actually pulls it right back and goes, this is not how it's going to start. It is going to start, but it's going to be in a way that's not based on your need for vengeance or your need to justify anything to Xander. And I love that he can separate that. He's not very, very easy for a teenage boy or a teenage girl to say, well, you like the other guy, so I'm just out of here because I don't even
Yeah.
care anymore. You know, like he's like he puts that separately. He knows that it's okay for Willow to have feelings for Xander and to have feelings for him, and that's very mature. Like I know
It is
people in their
very
30s and
mature.
40s who can't think that way.
Yeah.
That's what, I don't, normal might not be the best. Ideal. It's like the ideal.
Ideal, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
He's the anti-angel.
And then the other major one that changes in this episode is everyone's relationship with Jenny Calendar.
Yeah.
So, you know, Buffy, we got the lead into that last week where we find out that, you know, she's from the, what is it, the Calabash tribe or whatever it is.
Calderash.
And Calderash, Calabash, that's like, what's that? A water container? Something. Anyway, she's Jenny from the block. And so Buffy first attacks her in class, and I love that. You know, you had that dream sequence where Angel says you've just got to know what to see or know what you're looking at, kind of thing, and then she wakes up and goes, "Ah, Jenny," and then she just storms into class furiously. Giles is shocked, and you know he asks Buffy, "Well, how do you know you were responsible?" And I just love Buffy just gives him one look, and he finally gets it. He didn't get it in the library. He finally gets it now. Oh, and nothing more has to be said. And I love that. And then again, that's that change in relationship where a few episodes she realized he was a human being with feelings and a history and so on. And now he realizes, oh yeah, she's not just the Slayer. She's a teenage girl. And she had, you know, we talked about that cutscene, Penny, last week, where Jenny was talking about her having a relationship, and Giles was almost sort of denying that. Oh no, they're just friends, whatever. And now he really realizes, oh, she's got her own life that is separate to being a Slayer. And I think it's a very sudden realization for him. So their relationship again changes with that. But he's also realizing that Jenny has deceived them all along. She's there on ulterior motives that none of them knew about. And that changes them forever. And later when they're getting ready to attack the judge, and Jenny asks what else she can do, Buffy says, "Get out." Like, it's not a surprise that Buffy says that. But when Giles says it, man, that hit me hard. He's pretty savage. He just also says, "Yep, get out."
Yeah.
And you just realize that's it. That's nothing's the same between them.
He turns on Jenny so fast. Like, Jenny is like, "I swear I didn't know." And his face changes, and it's immediate. He's like, "I'm on Buffy's side." Like, there's no question.
And he's always going to be on Buffy's side. And it reminds me of, you know, a relationship that you might have where maybe you've got kids and you have a new boyfriend or a new girlfriend and you're into them and that's cool. But the second they come at one of your kids or don't support one of your kids, then that's it.
Yeah.
It's just a deal breaker for him. And yeah, we're going to see the repercussions of all of that later on. But I thought it was fascinating that in this show that is mostly about Buffy and Angel and the change of their relationships, that we do have significant changes in at least 3 other relationships in the same episode, and I loved that. And I did notice it a lot more the second time when I was going back through and viewing it and writing my notes, and I thought, wow. And it's not, they don't bash you over the head with it. It's just in the lines of things that happen, but you realize how different things are for all of them, and it is moving everything to the next level, all of the relationships and all of the plot, which is great.
Since we're talking about Jenny, I wanted to talk a little bit about her uncle and his description of vengeance. You know, he talks about most people think vengeance is a verb. They think it's payback. It's like commerce, but it's not. It's a living thing. It lasts through generations. It commands. It kills. It's so interesting. You know, when I was in law school and I guess probably before that, I thought a lot about the differences between vengeance and justice. I am a very strong opponent of the death penalty in all cases, except Negan on The Walking Dead, but that's a different thing. I just don't believe that there should be state-sanctioned murder. I don't think that there's any reason to ever kill people. And the thing that most pro-death penalty people say to me all the time is, well, what if it was like someone you loved that got killed? Wouldn't you want to kill the murderer? And I'm like, yeah, probably, but that's why I wouldn't be able to choose. Like, it wouldn't be up to me. It would be up to a court. that's why we have a court. That's what the point is of the justice system, is that it shouldn't be personal vendettas. And I just love that they even had the conversation, right? That he's like, we're not servants of justice. We do our role, we play our part, and if his soul isn't tormenting him anymore, then he doesn't deserve to have it. And she's like, but people are going to get killed. And he's like, people always get killed. It's such a different way of thinking about the world. And what's going on in the news right now, and I don't want this to be a political podcast, but the war going on in Israel and Palestine, A, is horrific. B, it's a vengeance war. It's not about justice. And it's, both sides have so much hatred for the other side that this has been going on for decades, right? Like, Israel and the Palestinians have been at each other's throats since the creation of Israel, and there's so much hatred and vengeance on both sides that it's this quagmire that is very hard for people on the outside to even understand. And, so many different attempts at creating peace have failed because of this attachment to vengeance, right? Nobody's willing to let that go and think more about justice. And it's tragic, and it's in the real world, and it's another example of this show bringing up a really deep point in a situation that they didn't have to be deep about it, right? This could have been just a sensationalized show about like, oh, Angel turned and now he's evil, but they got into it, and it's moving. I appreciate that.
They do always seem to take it one step further. There's always some sort of deeper meaning or philosophical approach that you can take to it. Jeez, sorry, my cat's trying to knock over everything on my desk right now. He just wants to talk about Buffy. It's fine. So my other point that always comes up in this episode is, how much it sets up for the future, and how many little hints, kind of like in related to what you were saying, Anwen, about all these different changes in relationships. I think this episode is such a pivotal one for not just the season, but the rest of the series, including, the Angel spinoff, with how much is revealed and how much is set up. And one thing that will always stick out with me is everybody's reactions to Angel's turning. And Xander, when Willow is, talking to Angel, and he ends up kind of holding her hostage briefly, and Xander's freaking out, and he doesn't assume that anything has gone wrong. He's more like, I knew that guy was trouble. Like, I knew I shouldn't have trusted him. And I'll talk about it a bit more in the spoilery section, but the way each of our main characters react to this and react to Buffy is really telling and important in how their relationships develop in the future. But I think each time I'll rewatch it, and I watched it a few times when I was sick last week just to, really let it sink in, and focusing on a different Scooby Gang member each time is kind of fun, because with Giles, like, I do love how instantly he is on Buffy's side. He understands, he gets her as soon as she gives him that look. He doesn't push her on it. He doesn't try to make her feel bad about it or feel guilty for anything at all. And Willow is also very supportive. But I don't know, I think I just love how much of a pivotal episode this is to the entire series, and how well thought out it is. That it takes that leap. It's like the opposite of jumping the shark. Something that's a good thing. Jumping, I don't know, like the opposite of jumping the shark and taking the show in a direction that just doesn't make much sense or is a little too out there. This just solidifies it as one of the greatest TV shows in history. And that's pretty much my other point, is just trying too hard not to nerd out about how excellent this sets us up for the future.
And even more so when you realize that they didn't know what the future was. These guys were writing, season by season, and even within a season, they didn't know what was going to be happening by the end of that season. And when you look at the whole arc of both Buffy and Angel, and you look back on an episode like this, it makes it more incredible that they were able to create this magic that led on to more magic, but without having it as a plan. It really is. It's incredible
Some
writing
good
and the acting that
instincts.
goes along with it.
Yeah.
in
It's
that writing.
fantastic writing.
Knowing
Absolutely.
just in general what is going to... I think there's a JW quote about not giving the audience what they want, but giving them what they need. They don't necessarily know that they need it, and that is absolutely what they did
For
with
sure.
Angelus.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think any fan was out there being like, oh, I wish they would do something different with Angel and like make him evil. Like, it wouldn't have occurred to me.
No.
He's so nice to Buffy. Let's make him be really mean.
And, looking back, there's foreshadowing, right? There's, like, romance is dangerous. We get that in Reptile Boy. And we know that Angel tormented Drusilla, right? And we know that he tormented some poor gypsy girl. But I don't think anyone saw this coming. Like, oh, they're gonna take his soul back away. Like, I couldn't have predicted it. And it...
No.
But in
That's
retrospect, it's like, oh, that's the perfect thing to do. Like, it's so interesting that way.
Yeah, I've got a bit more to say on Angel and Buffy as well, and that change and that switch from them being, in love to being mortal enemies. And there's the whole time so far, over the whole 2 seasons from the very first episode, it has been slowly getting them together. And we talked about that last week, about how the heat kind of intensified over the last few episodes to the point where you can kind of believe that they would go to bed together. And now the plot has changed dramatically and they're mortal enemies. And because I just started rewatching with you guys on season 2, I hadn't seen season 1 for years, maybe 15 years. So just while I was researching this episode, I thought I'd go back to the pilot and see when we first see Angel and we first see him. And he's pretty different, actually, to what he comes out to later. So he's been lurking around watching her, and then he stalks her in this back alley, which is pretty sinister in itself. He's wearing this crushed velvet jacket. At all, Angel. Like, I don't think we see this jacket again, but he's wearing this kind of like so over the top, 90s. Dramatic, white, crispy white collared shirt with this crushed velvet. He looks like a magician. He's smarmy and he's quite smirky, in the way that he speaks. He's not Broody Angel yet. I know they were just figuring him out, and he gives her a cross. And I did some reading and actually found out that they didn't envision him as a vampire. So when the character was first created, and even in this first episode, JW and the crew weren't actually sure what they were going to do with Angel, other than this is a character who is an anti-vampire. He wants to kill the vampires, and he's a love interest for Buffy. They didn't even know he was. So he's not playing a vampire with a soul in this first episode. He's playing mysterious, suave, velvet jacket guy. And the idea was even floated that I know, creepy. I don't think he would have lasted a second. And the idea was floated even that he would be an actual angel, like that he's there as an actual angel. And it wasn't until the episode Angel, which is episode 7 in season 1, that the series finally settled on him being a vampire with a soul. Which is amazing, isn't it? Like, it is flying by the seat of your pants. Let's just see what happens with this guy.
Yeah.
And so around the same time that audiences found out his true identity is when the cast and crew realized what they were going to do with his character. And I watched a little snippet from episode 7 too, when we do find out. And that's a pretty funny episode too. Angel goes back to Buffy's house after he's been chased by vampires. And she does that thing where she pretends, so Joyce meets him and says, oh, okay, off you go. And so she pretends, says goodnight, and then like good night, and he closes the door, and then he's still there, and she sneaks him up to her room. It's so teenage.
So
Cool. I'll turn around while I get changed. Like, it's very fun to watch. But again, so different to what happens later, with Angel.
So fun.
Gosh,
So
it is crazy.
coming back to this episode, when Buffy realizes what he's become, and she goes back to her own bed, and you were saying, Cara, and she cries herself to sleep, and we've all been there. I mean, we haven't all been betrayed by our vampire boyfriend, but we have all gone back to our bed after a hard day and cried into our pillows and our soft toys. Everyone's done it.
Yeah.
A lot of grown-ups I know still do it, and that's good. That's healthy.
I think I did
But
that like
this-
3 weeks ago. So
Yeah, I did it this week. It's been a week. And that's a safe place. Again, it's that kind of being aware of Buffy and her sort of sanctuary that she's got, and going back to her inner teenage girl. And you get that flashback scene that we talked about before, where Angel says you have to know what to see. And I was interested in that scene, thinking, is it Buffy's own inner wisdom telling her about Jenny, or is there some sort of supernatural force where part of good Angel is still kind of helping her in this visitation? Doesn't really matter which, but I thought that was quite interesting.
I love that dream, because when David Boreanaz steps into the sunlight and his skin is translucently pale, which is my natural state, I just always think, did they tell David Boreanaz he wasn't allowed to go out in the sun for 6 years?
I bet they did.
He's so pale.
Do not get
or they
a
just
tan.
maybe they just blew out the exposure so that he would look super white. But because I think the actor is actually a bit more olive. Like, you see him in other things, and he's kind of quite tan. I also did a bit of reading about, you hear a lot about Sarah Michelle Gellar and David Boreanaz being really good friends, and a lot of people talked about, did they get together kind of thing, but I think they were just super close as friends. And they were the exact opposite of their characters. So you've got these love scenes between Buffy and Angel that are really intense and quite steamy by 90s kind of broadcast TV standards, especially last episode we didn't get it so much. It was kind of kiss, kiss, fall back on the bed, ... But in this dream sequence, we did get quite a steamy, kind of quite stylized, nothing graphic, but there was, a lot of close-ups and a lot of sighing and moaning, and it was pretty hot. But neither of the actors could take them seriously, apparently. And because they were such good friends, they were constantly pranking each other when it came time to kiss in their scenes. So Sarah has said in interviews that she would eat tuna fish and pickles before kissing scenes just to freak him out. And she would also pin or sew together bits of clothing that David had to take off, so that when he went to take it off, it wouldn't. So cool.
I like that. That makes it so much better.
That's
I will say
so
too,
sweet.
I think one of my least favorite bits of trivia for Buffy is the fact that the heavy breathing during this scene is not David Boreanaz and Sarah Michelle Gellar, because they were too kind of embarrassed to ask them to go back and sound and do this kind of sexual breathing. So instead, it's Joss Whedon and the sound editor who are doing it. And every time I watch it now, I'm just like, no.
Okay, I'm not watching that scene again. Now I don't think it's hot anymore. I can imagine that. He's like, okay, we need to record the ADR on this. Hey, sound editor, let's go in the booth and breathe heavy. Ew!
It's just so uncomfortable. Every time I hear it now, it kind of takes me out of it. And I'm just like, well, here we go. Thanks.
I'm so glad you told me, because it's so bad it's good. You know what I mean? That's such a funny piece of trivia. I love it. I love it.
It is fun because it's so, I don't know, it's like, okay, so what does it sound like? Because you can tell watching it that it is not really, it's not them in sync, or at least maybe I've just watched it too many times at this point. But having that thought, it almost makes it a little bit funnier and more bearable and not as tragic and horrifying. But the one scene too that I think will always stick out with me, this is just one of my little notes, is when they do go, to find Jenny's uncle and find him dead, and Angelus has written in blood, "Was it good for you too?"
Oh, so
on the
mean.
wall. It is just the psychological torture that he inflicts on Buffy is horrific. And every time I see that one, it's like another little gut punch. But it makes me wonder, like, I know that it was JW that wrote this episode, and sometimes just like, damn, man, like, how did you come up with some of these lines and this stuff?
Knowing
like,
what
this
we
is
know about
so
him now, it's kind of
so
creepy,
intense, and just not great to think about. But it does make for an excellent, just like, villain in such a quick turn of events, because the way they portray Angel, they had to make him do something horrific and be just absolutely awful in order for us to feel, you know, completely cut off from it. And
it can't just be all talk and him saying that he's going to torture and kill her friends, because, you know, main plot characters pretty much. But you have to see him do something horrific that you believe right away. And I think the uncle was a very good way to do that.
Yeah, that was intense.
One scene that I really love, actually kind of two scenes, are the endings. One, when Giles drives Buffy home, and she's a wreck, and she says to Giles, "You must be so disappointed," and he's like, you know, "No, if you want someone to make you feel guilty, I'm not the person. What you'll get from me is my respect and my support." And it's such a beautiful moment of supporting her and understanding her and meeting her where she is. You know, he says, "Did you act rashly? Yeah, but you loved him, and I get it, and he loved you." And it's it makes you forgive everything from the Dark Age, and I think Buffy does too. She's like, "Oh my God, you're so there for me right now. I can't believe how supportive you're being." And then the incredibly sad scene with Joyce when they're watching that like sappy old movie, and Buffy doesn't even blow out the candle. She's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna let it burn." And it's interesting that Joyce doesn't ask her any questions. She just lets Buffy like cuddle with her, and it's these two parental figures that she has, right? Joyce and Giles, and both of them offer her in that moment just comfort. There's no pushing, there's no questioning.
Thank goodness.
And she has everything she needs here. So she has Giles who understands everything that goes on with her, but then she also has Joyce who at this stage doesn't know anything that goes on in Buffy's life. But in some ways that's nice. I think Buffy likes having that to come home to, that she's just Buffy. She's just a girl, and she's just got her mom, and they just get to snuggle on the couch and not have to talk about her day killing demons. And I think Buffy's, I think there's part of that Buffy must enjoy and just really relish that's still intact, you know.
That Giles moment in the car is another one that almost always gets me to tear up. Like, it's just so sweet, because you can tell too that Buffy has just like resigned herself, like, he's so disappointed in me, like everybody's judging me, like this is awful, and the way he just immediately shuts that down is so sweet. And I think also kind of, I don't know, for that time period, he's kind of like, he's her father figure basically, and for him to come out as supportive as opposed to judging her for anything was really nice to see. He's just immediately supportive of her.
It's so weird to watch Ted Lasso right now.
Oh yeah,
because I'm deep
very different on that
in Buffy, and then on Ted Lasso, he's such a jerk.
Yeah,
and
really
it's
that's cool. I haven't seen it yet. I do want to watch it, but I didn't realize he was in it.
It's really good, and he plays another character named Rupert. But the character on Ted Lasso, it could not be more different from Giles. It's night and day. Cool. It's pretty funny.
It's almost like a more posh Ripper attitude.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's Ripper.
It's not quite. He's just such a dick.
He's the worst. We haven't talked really at all about the judge.
Oh yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, okay,
that part.
We're completely skipped over the fact that we've had another apocalypse averted because there's other more important stuff going on.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It is pretty great that Oz is like, I know where I'd go if I was gonna line up. And he turns out to be right. You know, he just joined the Scooby Gang a couple, like last episode, and he's already contributing, right?
And this sort of solidifies it, doesn't it? It's his place in there. I thought the scene was pretty over the top, but I think it was also kind of necessary. Like, we have to get the judge out of the way because he's not the big bad anymore. Angel's the big bad, so let's just get rid of him. And I love when Buffy gets out the rocket launcher and both Drusilla and Angel dive for cover. They immediately know. I mean, I don't know what chance. I guess Drusilla's kind of been in the world for a bit. She seems a bit out of it, but you know, she probably knows what that is.
It can't
the
be
judge
good.
has got no idea.
What's
and he
that
just says,
do?
"What does that do?"
Yeah, it's so crazy.
Such a good moment.
It's so funny.
You need some levity in this
And
episode.
then, exactly. And then when she's obliterated him and Drusilla freaks out and Angel runs off, I love how it cuts to the Scooby Gang. There's a shot of all of them, and I just love the expression on their faces. So if you freeze frame that, but it's really funny. Willow, Xander, Giles, and Cordelia all look kind of shocked and scared, but Oz just looks super impressed. Like he's going, you can hear it in his head going, "Cool."
Yeah.
It's just like got this little Oz smile. It's
great.
And then that great line when Buffy's like, "Pick up the pieces and keep them separate," and Cordy's like, "Pick up the pieces. Our job sucks."
Yeah. And then it cuts back again. There's another funny Oz moment where Angel and Buffy are fighting, and then it cuts back to the cleanup section, and Oz just goes, "Arm." And that's really funny because he pointed that out in the last episode. What's this? Oh, it looks like an arm.
He's very good at identifying arms.
Oz.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
It's brilliant.
Nice little continuity there.
Yeah.
And this we did talk about, but it was hard not to talk about in the Halloween episode with Xander's knowledge of his soldier days for a couple of hours on Halloween popping up throughout the future of the series. And this is the first time that we see that knowledge come into play again.
Yeah, he gets to be very suave in this episode. Like, that plan was a really good plan. And he executed it perfectly, and it worked. Like, it's pretty great. Xander doesn't always get to be the hero or the cool guy, but when he does, he gets to be really cool.
Yeah, he's usually the comic relief, but I actually did, you know, he's often been annoying, but I found him a bit more kind of likable and a bit more cool in this episode. And, you know, even, of course, he breaks Willow's heart, but he also risks his life to save her. You know, it focuses on her finding out about Cordelia and then being upset, but he risks his life. He goes up to Angel with a crucifix and manages to get Willow away from him, which is incredible.
Yeah.
So that definitely puts him up in my mind. And then I just love his lines, like, "Wear something trashy."
One of the lines.
The other one was, "I'm 17. Looking at linoleum makes me want to have sex." Was that the one you're thinking of, Cara?
Yeah, that made me cackle. I had forgotten about that, and I was like, that's funny.
It's so funny.
It's true. Poor Xander.
Cordelia's really funny in that scene when she's like, "I'm not a soldier, right?"
Am I?
Like, she doesn't know even what she's doing there.
Oh my god.
It's just perfect. And then she gives Xander props. She's like, "It's pretty cool that you have all this military knowledge."
Got respect for him.
Yeah, it's not like he got that knowledge on purpose or through any kind of effort, but it is cool that he has it.
He has it now, and it's useful.
It is very useful.
And we now know that Sunnydale not only has a bus depot, docks, an airport, a college, a community college, and also now an army base.
Sunnydale, constantly expanding and contracting.
Well, and I will say too, just a couple of honorable mentions. We mentioned Cordelia's couple of funny lines, but I just love when they bring her in to stuff because she just is so effortlessly funny. And you know, she is a little vapid sometimes and materialistic in a way, but there's something endearing about it with her. She's not just two-dimensional, and anytime she's on screen, it really just makes me happy, especially in this season. The way they use her in season 2 and bring her back a little bit more and get her involved with Xander is great. And then, obviously, love Spike. We love Spike around here. But watching him start to struggle with the closeness between Drew and Angelus, and I feel almost bad for him. I remember watching this the first couple times and kind of feeling bad for Spike. I was like, oh, I've been there. Like, we've all had a time where it's like, I feel kind of left out. It's not fun. And for Spike,
and
it's
he literally can't follow them
mm-hmm.
because of the wheelchair, and they just like leave him. They're like, see ya. And
poor Spike.
That's so painful.
I think it's another time where we can see how he is not necessarily like other vampires. Like, there is something different about him and his feelings and the way that he emotes. But I do love his line when he's like, when do we destroy the world already?
Yeah.
Like, that's such a Spike line. But gosh, I'll save that for spoiler section. Yeah. But it's hard, but I do love the dynamic that we start to see come up between the three of them, Spike, Drew, and Angelus.
I talked about having the same outfit as Jenny last week. Well, this week I had that exact necklace with the glass beads and the little silver spaces.
Nice.
I had that. I loved that.
Nice.
I don't know what happened to it. I noticed that Angel's house has windows. There's a lot of shots with rain reflected on the wall. I'm like, come on, you're a vampire. Get a basement apartment with windows.
Yeah,
this is a terrible choice.
Yeah,
exactly. Not thick curtains, like, gauzy curtains that you can see the rain reflections. It looked cool, but it's not practical. And the other thing that I've been thinking about over the last several episodes is I just love how they didn't have cell phones back then.
Yeah.
And you could not do this show, that you could not have a lot of the plot points now. The plot lines just wouldn't work. Like, there's so many times in Buffy where no one knows where everyone else is. Oh, they didn't check in with you. Where are they? Or, Angel gets stuck in that cage by Kendra and the sunlight's coming and he can't text them and say, hey, guys, I'm over at the in the bar. And it's good because it makes it more interesting. It makes it different to things that we watch now. And then also where it makes me remember this is what life was like when you didn't know where someone was and you had to meet up at a time or find a landline or, hope to call them at a place where there was also a landline. And I think it's really cool. It just gives a different dynamic to the show.
My friends and I had, I lived in a small town during high school, and one of the hangout spots for my group of friends was the parking lot at what later became a Store 24. But at the time it was called Pettybrook Market, and we would call each other on the payphone. Right? Like the payphone in that parking lot was, and we wrote each other's phone numbers in like with a code of what the name was on the phone. It's on the payphone, like case. And we would call each other there because like at night, usually one of my friends would be in the parking lot and I'd call to see if anyone was there, if I wanted to come over and hang out. I can't even imagine that now. That's so weird.
That's so funny. It's so different, so drastically different. When I was looking at the original air date, typed in on this day in history, when it popped up, I think you guys mentioned this last week, I can't remember, the number one song in the US was Truly Madly Deeply by Savage Garden. And I remember that song on repeat on the radio and I loved it. And so I would sit listening to the radio in my room with my boombox and a blank cassette tape, trying to time it right for it to come on the radio and get it on my cassette tape.
And then sometimes the DJ would talk over the song.
Yes! And I was just like, shut up. This is not okay. I was like, I want the whole song. Just thinking about that and how different it is now, or if I can just type here on my iPhone real quick and buy it in like 2 seconds.
Or just listen to it on YouTube.
Yeah. Just type it in
and the video
it's there. But it also made me feel really old when I realized how much technology had changed. And that happens. I feel like with my generation, within like 5 years of when I was born in 1988, you know, we were still growing up without the internet when we were little, and we didn't have cell phones until we were older and all this stuff. And it just kind of hits me every now and then how drastically different it is.
I'm so glad I grew up without cell phones and social media.
Me
I
too.
really am. When I look back now, it was so much more of an adventure and just living in the moment. It's so good.
It was simpler.
I feel sad that kids now can't do that.
Facebook was open to the public I think my senior year of high school, and you had to have, you know, your .edu address in order to join. And I can still remember getting my information from my college and finally being able to register for Facebook. And I am so happy that it was at the end of my high school experience and not as I was growing up. And even then, like, you'd have a disposable camera or your digital camera that you then took and had to put the memory stick in and pick and choose what photos. Like, I don't know how much my childhood would have been affected if I could just stream or upload anything immediately because I felt like it.
I don't think I would have ever stopped watching TV.
No.
Yeah. Just so much available.
Oh,
and that's the thing
goodness.
kids today don't realize. Like, we try and talk to our kids that anything that you record or post is there forever for anyone to see ever.
The internet
and they don't
is
get that.
forever.
They don't get it. Yeah. So it's tricky. I can't even imagine what shenanigans would have been immortalized forever when I was a teenager in early 20s.
It makes TV so
so
much
glad.
better, though. They don't have technology to fall back on, or those obnoxious, like, you know, pop-ups where you can see what people are texting each other on shows.
I hate those because I always don't read them fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wait, I missed. Oh, there was a pop-up. Oh, it makes me crazy.
Yeah, they used that a lot on a couple of your shows, Penny. Extraordinary and Hulk, She-Hulk both had that pop-up kind of look.
The number of times I had to pause watching Extraordinary, that happened to me quite frequently.
I had to pause watching Extraordinary a lot because there was really hilarious stuff in the background usually. So it was always worth it to pause because I was like, oh my God, that poster behind him says something hilarious.
So
if
fun.
you guys haven't watched Extraordinary, I highly recommend it. It's on Hulu in the US, Disney Plus in other places. There's definitely a season 2 coming. All right, that's the end of my plug for Extraordinary.
And Penny and Greg's coverage is fantastic. I'll plug you for that.
Thanks,
I
Anwen.
really enjoyed it.
We had so much fun covering that show because it's just nonstop hilarious. It's much like this show that it externalizes internal anxieties using this metaphor of superheroes and superpowers. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, I was going to mention, I'm currently watching Gen V on Amazon Prime, and it's a spin-off of The Boys that takes place at a college. And it is very similar to Buffy in that, again, it takes sort of young adult issues and explores them through this externalized feature of superpowers. Unlike Buffy, it's incredibly R-rated, if not even more. It's very violent and very graphic and very sexual, but it's also really well made and quite funny. If Buffy were being made today by like a streaming service and not a broadcast TV station, I imagine it would have been a lot more graphic like Gen V is, and it wouldn't have the same kind of magic, and also like young girls wouldn't have been able to watch it. I feel like Buffy is a great role model for like sort of a middle school aged girl, right? Like, this is what high school might be like. This could help prepare me for it. And Buffy and Willow and Cordelia are also different from each other. You know, there's something for a young woman to identify with.
And there are so many subtle and not so subtle life lessons to be learned in the first couple seasons, like the dangers of fraternity parties.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing to pay attention to.
Oh, I have 2 pieces of trivia. Christine Sutherland, who plays Joyce, told the BBC that this episode is her favorite as a fan. And also, this episode won an Emmy for Outstanding Makeup for a TV series.
That is pretty cool.
Wow.
Which is funny because we talked about this before, that, 12 years of The Walking Dead, and my standards for special effects makeup are just really, really high now.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time,
like,
Buffy was cutting
Greg
edge.
Nicotero.
Yeah.
Yep. But it is so funny to watch it now, especially the first couple of seasons where, if you have a current, like a newer TV, and it will not obviously go full screen. If it does go full screen, it's all stretched out and doesn't look right. And the age of the show with some of the makeup is just, it's kind of fun though. I think it adds to the almost campy feel sometimes.
The nostalgia.
Yeah, it
does look muddy on a current TV.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't look as good as it could. I wish they would remaster it.
That would be outstanding.
Seasons 6 and 7, I think, are in HD. They were shot in HD, but 1 through 5 were pre-HD. So yeah, they look kind of dim.
Dim's a good word.
Yeah,
that's pretty much it. Still fun, but it would be excellent if they decided to go back and remaster it. I would buy whatever DVD package they wanted to sell me for that.
Me too. I totally would.
100%.
Kara, we'll start with you. Does it still slay?
I think not only does it still slay, but I think it always will. Just because I think no matter how much time passes, there will always be something in this episode that will resonate with viewers. And the way that Sarah Michelle Gellar and David Boreanaz act off each other in this is just spectacular. I'm waiting for the day where the answer is going to be no, and I don't know if there's ever going to be a no. It doesn't still slay, but this one absolutely still does for me.
Anwen, how about you? What do you think?
Absolutely, still slays, and like we spoke about, it just kicks it up a notch and takes it to that next level of opportunity for more slaying later, literally and figuratively, because it's just great, and it becomes a show that has so much more depth to it and so much more heart, more emotion, and more intense relationships. I love it.
And that's a hat trick. I definitely agree. It still
Same
slays.
for you.
Yeah.
I will note too, so every time, I don't think we've been mentioning it, but I'll look at what the broadcast draw, the number of households it drew in for each episode when we podcast. And to give you an idea, like the earlier episodes of season 2 that we were talking about were all around like 3.2 million, 3.7 million. And this one was actually the biggest of the entire series with 8.2 million viewers tuning in. Which, that Tuesday night move seemed like a really good idea. And especially doing the second part right after Surprise on Monday night. But I was like, I don't think that's a coincidence either. This episode gets brought up over and over and over again about being one of the best in the series, and people definitely tuned in, which is crazy when you think about, like, that is watching live. Like, everything's skewed nowadays with streaming and, DVR and stuff like that, but 8.2 million people tuning in to watch this one of Buffy back when it aired.
Everyone was talking about it. Even if you hadn't seen it. If you watched anything on the WB, you saw all the commercials for all the other WB shows. So even if you didn't watch the shows, you sort of were up on the basics of the plots. Yeah. Like, I never watched Dawson's Creek, but I know a lot about Dawson's Creek. It's just, it's kind of strange.
It's so different when we actually had to sit and watch commercials and trailers.
Yeah. All right, that's the end of the main section of the podcast.
Stay tuned if you want to hear the spoilery discussion.
If you'd like to join the discussion or find out more about Podcastica, you can find all of our contact information at podcastica.com.
And you can write in or record a voice message right there on podcastica.com, or find links to our social media pages and all our other shows.
I just started listening to the revisited coverage of Ted Lasso, as I mentioned Ted Lasso a couple times in this episode, and it's really, really fun, and it's amazing. I've watched all of the Ted Lasso episodes several times, and listening to a podcast about it is bringing up all these things that I still hadn't noticed on my own, and it's really fun. It's Ben and Kristen, and they are clearly having a ball doing it, and they just started, so everybody, you have time to go catch up.
Ted Lasso is one of those shows that's just so happy. Like we had a bar luncheon, like a Texas State bar luncheon this week, and the state bar president of Texas gave her speech that is based on, you know, being like Ted Lasso. And so she shows all these clips and like little bits of wisdom to take with you into law practice. And I was like, this feels completely directed at me. Like,
yeah.
Excellent. I was like, I watched that goodness, I watched that episode like last week when I was falling asleep. But Ted Lasso is another one of those shows that I think I can't stop recommending. But I
can't wait. I can't wait. It's supposed to be so good. I've heard so much.
Yeah, you're gonna love it.
Have you guys watched House of Usher? Follow the House of Usher?
Not yet. I'm excited to start it.
I will not, of course, spoil anything, but I binged it when I shouldn't have. It was a very long week at work, and I came home and I watched the first half the night before last, and finished the rest of the episodes until late last night. And I know that is going to be covered on Strange Indeed, and I cannot wait to hear them talk about that. That's another one I would definitely recommend. I know their coverage is going to be fantastic too.
Yeah, I was just going to say we haven't mentioned Strange Indeed for a bit, and the first episode for Fall of the House of Usher has dropped, so that's already there ready for you to listen to. And I just love that Strange Indeed has such an extreme range. They've got that, and then they've also got the Great British Baking Show. So how cool is that? That's a great example of Podcastic has got something for everyone, sometimes even on the same podcast.
It's pretty perfect.
Hit like, follow, and subscribe. It really helps other listeners find us.
Next time, we'll be covering Season 2, Episode 15, Phases.
And we'll be joined by Jim.
Talk to you next time. Thanks, everyone.
You're a fool. No weapon forged can stop me.
That was then.
This is now.
That's the end of the non-spoiler section. If you want to avoid spoilers, you should stop listening now. And on to the Watcher's Diaries. Now we can just talk about all the spoilers we want to talk about.
It's too bad we can't sneak a look at the Watcher Diaries. I'm sure it's full of fun facts to know and tell.
Yeah, that's too bad. That stuff is private.
Also, Giles keeps them in his office, in his personal files.
Most importantly, it would be wrong.
Oh, because this episode sets so much up.
I love the Spike, Drusilla, Angel love triangle.
Mm-hmm.
They never explicitly say that Angel is having sex with Drusilla, but he sure teases Spike about it a lot. He's always like, I know what she wants, and I know what she likes, and oh, you're in a wheelchair. I better help Drusilla while you can't service her. I mean, he's really mean to Spike, which is so funny. It's funny every time. And Drusilla is like completely happy to have two dudes, right? She's like, awesome. I've got my usual lover, my sire lover. I'm happy. She's delighted.
She's all in. Yeah. And this little like tiff that starts, this rift that grows between Spike and Drew, leads to one of my all-time favorite interactions between Spike and Joyce.
Oh, yes.
And I just, every time I see this episode, I just think about that coming up. And Spike, you know, he really is not like other vampires. He's so hurt by Drew and her, you know, kind of pushing him off to the side. And it's just, Oh, it's brilliant. Especially how it's contrasted with Angel as Angelus just not giving a shit. Like, he does not care. He takes this sick kind of twisted joy in it and creating any sort of, discontent and bits of havoc wherever he is. Mm-hmm. And watching them play off each other is interesting, especially.
And it continues for years. Mm-hmm. Like, even when Spike has his soul and he has joined the show Angel, he is still making cracks about Angel's hair and his clothes, and like they hate each other. And there's that great moment when Angel is talking to the team and he's like, one of you is going to betray me. And Spike's like, ooh, me. It's just, that's another line that is funny to me every time. It's like Spike is like, I will be the betrayer. That's awesome. Yep. Like, it's so perfect. Yeah.
One thing that I had to catch myself from saying is, when we were talking about Xander and how he immediately is just like, it's Angel. Angel's gone bad. Like, we know Angel's bad. Like, I knew that guy was a problem. The way that he treats Buffy and handles this situation makes my blood boil every single time I rewatch it. And particularly once we have the introduction of Faith. Yeah. And how he, kind of jumps on board with her. It drives me absolutely crazy. But it's another thing that I think is an interesting bit of conflict for the show, because it seems 100% on board with Xander's character. It's completely within his character to behave that way. And I don't know, it's the layers of this show with how, not only has Buffy slept with her first love and it's gone horribly, she's got ramifications socially, ramifications, in terms of being a slayer. And her friend's Riley. I don't know if you can hear him, but I'm sure he picked it up on the microphone. Okay. He wants to talk about Buffy too. But the Xander aspect of this is one of the most irritating things for me to watch, and not as opposed to the saddest thing that we know is coming up with Ginny Calendar and how that kind of changes Giles' perspective on Angelus and everything too. I'm gonna have to start watching it as soon as we're done podcasting, because
I am excited for the next episode, because I am such an Oz fan, and it's very much an Oz episode, so it's really delightful.
Yeah, phases kind of gives you a bit of a indication.
Bit of a clue.
Yeah. What's going on.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about was that scene at the end when you've got Buffy and Angel fighting, and he's kind of taunting her, and he says, oh, you can't kill me. Haha, you can't kill me. And it's interesting because, we see so far that Angel and Buffy have gotten to know each other really well, and they trust each other, and before he turns evil, he seems to know and understand her. But it's interesting to me that he really doesn't. He underestimates her because he doesn't believe that she can. And true, she can't in that moment. But, it's like the next day. She's kind of in shock. But she just says, give me time. And I love that it solidifies that resolve in her to be able to do it. And he's, bad Angel Angelus is so arrogant and so conceited and so, looking down on her, that he doesn't believe that she can do it. And he just thinks it's within his power to defeat her, to kill her family and friends. He's just so confident with that. And I love that she basically plays his foil on that and comes back round to it, because we do know that she's got it in her later in the season.
She does not back down at all.
Yep.
No.
I do like the groin kick, though, in the meantime.
Yeah.
He really had that coming.
Got him. Yeah.
The fact that it's like kind of raining on them. I mean, it's sprinklers, but it has the effect of rain, and that it's lit. It's like brightly lit at the mall while they're being rained on. It's a really interesting scene, because Buffy almost always is fighting outdoors or in like a crypt or something. But to have
In
a
the dark
fight
night,
at a brightly lit mall is so different from any other fight in the series.
It's
Yeah,
really
I think
different.
that helped with how savage it was. It was just really obvious that they were really kicking each other's butt. It was really cool to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought about with this episode was we talked about the relationships, and I did a bit of reading and I found some really cool little snippets about what all the actors thought of each of the different relationships and
cool.
who should have been with who,
Nice.
which was really cool. So for some reason, and I don't know why, I don't know this person, but apparently in 2020, the candidate for the governor of Georgia, Stacey Abrams, tweeted about Buffy.
Oh my
I don't know why,
gosh.
but anyway, apparently
I
they
love
did.
her, so great.
Yeah, that's so
Anyway,
funny.
so she said a really cool line. To be fair, Angel was the right boyfriend for Buffy coming into her power. Spike was the right man to be with her as she became the power. And I loved that. I
awesome.
thought that was really cool. And the tweet began a new discussion of Buffy's relationships, and it sparked a few comments from some of the different Buffy cast members, which I thought was quite cool. And they all had different ideas about who should be with who. So it said that Cordelia's actor, Charisma Carpenter, agreed with Abrams' sentiment, but added that she believes Cordelia was the right person for Angel. So despite her being that sort of mean girl, persona in Buffy, she does become his guiding light later on in Angel. And then contrast to that, Alison Hannigan, who plays Willow, tweeted, actually, Buffy should have dated Willow. And although their relationship as characters, it stayed platonic, but a lot of fans apparently did hope that they would become a couple following Willow's girlfriend, Tara, dying later in the series.
Oh, that one's going to be hard.
And then as far as Angel, David Boreanaz thought that Darla is Angel's soulmate.
Oh.
And Sarah thinks that Buffy and Angel belonged together. So they had different thoughts about the characters themselves, about who they should be with. It's quite interesting.
That is really interesting. It's funny that she thought she should be with Angel in the end. I mean, I don't think that she loved Spike, right? She cared about Spike and she liked Spike, and he was good for her in some ways and bad for her in other ways.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's, end game for her.
No.
But
Buffy didn't seem to love herself very much when she was with Spike.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there was a lot of self-loathing and whatnot going on there.
One of the saddest episodes, I think, is later in Angel, where Buffy comes back to visit him, and he becomes a human for a day.
It's so sad.
They actually,
kills me.
This is actually the only other time they do actually have sex. They actually get back together. And then there was some plot, I have to watch it again. It was so heartbreaking, but there was some plot point where he realizes that he's too weak as a human, so he has to become a vampire again, so he gets the spell reversed. But the only way to do that is that she won't remember it. And so he's got this memory of this perfect day together, and then she just becomes kind of cold, standoffish Buffy again, where this is my ex-boyfriend, whatever, see you later. Oh, it's
that episode is just heart-wrenching. But I think Sarah Michelle Gellar has talked about Angel before in terms of thinking that Angel was her one true love. Maybe not necessarily like, her soulmate and who she was supposed to end up with, but just acknowledging that Buffy did not experience that type of love again. That Angel was just kind of it for her. And that I can go along with. Like, that seems to be absolutely true.
Yeah.
And they can be two very different things, can't they? The person that is the great love of your life might not be the one that you end up with,
or the
and is
one
right
that's
for you long term.
Good for you to end up with. And it's just poor Buffy.
I mean,
relationships.
The way you fall in love at 16 or 17 is different. It just is. When it's your first love and you're so young, it's overwhelming. It's all encompassing. You have no frame of reference to give it perspective. So it just takes on these like mythic proportions in your mind in a way that no later relationship is going to be able to do, because you'll always have something else to compare it to. One of my favorite movies of all time is Practical Magic, and the character Jillian, played by Nicole Kidman, her two young nieces ask her what it's like to fall in love, and she has this great metaphor. She says, do you ever spin around and around until you get dizzy and you fall down? And they're like, yeah. And she's like, that's a little bit what love is like. Falling in love is like that. you know, the whole world turns upside down, but you can't be like that all the time. And I think Buffy definitely had that dizzy falling thing with Angel. And I don't know if you can have that more than once. I mean, if you can, that's wonderful.
I don't know. The way that they approach it in terms of, you know, the reason this happened is not because they had sex. Like, yes, technically it is. But it's because he experienced a moment of true happiness. And that would not have happened if he did not love Buffy the way that he did, and she had not loved him.
Exactly.
Because in multiple, you know, other parts of the series, it is brought up about, you know, oh, you gotta be careful, like, can't have sex with Angel, or it's like, and that's not what it is. Like, we see that with Darla a little bit, and then Faith and the mayor try to plot to have her to sleep with Angel and for Angel to become evil again. And it still kind of bugs me when I see it. I was like, do you guys not get it? Like, that's not why. Like, it's not just like...
It's not just sex.
It's not the sex. It's the connection.
It's like,
it's the connection and the love.
And it doesn't happen, like, while they're having sex. It's after. It's when they're...
after.
Well, she's
laying
asleep.
in bed and she's sleeping with him where he...
He's content.
And that just makes it so much worse, too. I mean, to be fair, the Ginny Calendar's family is brilliant in terms of enacting revenge. Like, that is horrific that he has turned evil the instant that he's finally able to have true happiness.
I love that
his soul.
When Buffy says, right, Jenny's like, they wanted to punish him for, he has to pay for what he did to my people. And Buffy's like, and me? What was I paying for? And it,
ugh.
Jenny, the look on Jenny's face is like, I know, it's indefensible, right? She's like, she's got nothing. And Giles is like, we're out, Jenny, you are scum. And he just like walks out. I love that the kids in the class are like, should we get the principal? What's going on? And Giles is like, you're all dismissed. Like, he's just like,
so funny. It's like, oh yeah, this is still a high school.
Nobody uses the library, but it is a high school. Giles's disinterest or ignorance or whatever about Buffy and Angel and how close they're getting is fucking child abuse and neglect. Like, he should have been all over that and been like, we don't know what might happen. Like, there's magic going on here that we don't understand. Like, he should have been involved as her watcher, as a mandatory reporter of child abuse, right? Like, Buffy's being preyed on by a much older man. He just lets it happen. Like, I don't know. Makes me very unhappy.
Yeah, I guess
it was one line that I didn't like in their conversation in the car at the end when he said, yes, you've behaved rashly. I'm like, hang on. No, she didn't. She was in love with him. He was in love with her. They made a promise to each other and a commitment to each other. I don't think her having sex with him was rash. It would have been if she'd known there was a risk that he would lose his soul, of course. But it wasn't. She wasn't aware of any consequence at all.
And she's 17.
And so
that's not that young.
This could not have been more predictable and foreseeable. Like, they should have seen this coming from a mile away, that she and Angel could have slept, like, would eventually sleep together. And no
one had thought that would be none of them.
Like, nobody would expect him to all of a sudden lose his soul again and turn evil and start, like,
they didn't
everyone. But yeah, the rashly comment is like, this was not rash.
Yeah, I mean, they were together for a long time. It's not like she slept with him that first night that he stayed in her bedroom with her.
And if you do think about it across the sort of school year, it's probably, season-wise, it's probably been a year and a half that they've actually been together.
Yeah. And he saved her life a bunch of times. Like, there's not any reason why she would have thought she couldn't trust him.
Yeah, absolutely. And he did love her. Like, he was 100% looking out for her best. He didn't know that would happen.
He wouldn't
either.
Like you said, he wouldn't have achieved true happiness if he didn't love her.
God, it just makes it so much worse.
Yeah.
It's so
It really
sad.
does.
I love that line when they find out that the uncle has been killed, and Giles says, he's just trying to make it harder for you, and she said he's just making it easier. And I love that. It kind of hardens her resolve even more, you know.
Which makes sense. And it's just started too. The way that he behaves, you know, for the rest of the Angelus arc in this season is so interesting, because we see Giles dealing with it afterwards. Everyone understandably has a little bit of legitimate PTSD. They have all gone through multiple traumas together, and I can't imagine, when you think of the practicality of it, being face to face with this person who did these horrible things and either tortured you, in the case of, you know, Giles especially, but your friends, and trying to come to terms with the fact, I think it's in season 3 when Buffy starts, you know, seeing him when he's back from hell. I don't know.
Yeah,
it
and they're all
everything up so beautifully.
I remember Giles says something like, "You don't have any respect for me or what I do."
Yeah. Which is rough.
Because Xander's being all like, he's evil, I hate him. There's no depth to Xander's reaction to Angel coming back. But Giles is interesting, because he sort of, he dismisses the others. And Buffy's like, thank you. And he's like, I feel like I need to remind you that Angel tortured me for hours. He's like, I saved my anger for when no one else was in the room.
Yeah.
But you're still going to get it.
I just love the cleverness of the judge being like, no weapon forged can destroy me. It's like, fun fact, Judge, now we have rocket launchers and tanks and all of these things that were not forged but made. And it's just... It keeps the show light.
This episode also had so many great zinger lines. You know, like, Spike, you've really got a yen to hurt this girl. And and Angel says, she made me feel like a human. That's not something you just forgive. It's just, it's such a compact line. There's so much in it. It keeps giving. There's all these layers to it. It's really... It's fun. The writing in this episode is stellar. To kill this girl, you have to love her.
That just sums up Angelus's point of view when it comes to kind of torture and his idea of what's quote unquote fun. Ugh. So twisted.
All right, are we done? I think we're done.
I think so. Because other things I would be tempted to talk about would just be talking about the rest of the entire series that comes from this. So that's silly.
We'll do that next week.
Lots more to come later.
That's the complete end of our show. Thanks for listening, everyone. Until next time, I'm Penny.
And I'm Kara.
And I'm Anwen.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.